I thank the Senate. Well, what we have seen today, Mr President, is extraordinary. Extraordinary. A government senator leaving on ideological grounds and on grounds of conviction and philosophy from the government benches. And what we have seen today really tells us something very important about this government, because what it is emblematic of, what Senator Bernadi's statement is emblematic of, is a government that is bitterly divided, a government that is coming apart at the seams, a government so riven with internal division it is more focused on its own issues than on the matters that matter most to Australians. And Senator Bernadi's resignation, Mr President, is not a cause of the deep divisions we now see on open display in the Senate chamber. It is a symptom. It is a symptom, because we know Senator Bernadi's view is far from an isolated one in this government, because we know that amongst those opposite he is one of many who believe that this government stands for nothing. This government stands for nothing, who believe that this government is led by a man who doesn't believe most of the things he is now forced to say, and that this is a government that is riven by factionalism, by dissent and distrust. This resignation is a consequence of the failure of leadership by the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister is leading a government that doesn't have an agenda, that doesn't have a philosophical framework. This is a government led by a man who has sold his soul for leadership. A Prime Minister so weak he's only allowed to remain in the job for as long as he betrays virtually everything he ever stood for. Virtually everything he ever stood for. A man who used to believe in marriage equality, now he's not even allowed to grant his members the right to vote. A man who used to believe in an Australian republic, he's not even allowed to talk about it now. A man who said he understood the need to change the tax system so young people could actually aspire to home ownership, he's now not even allowed to talk about negative gearing. A man who came to the job vowing to end a three-word slogan, forced to stand up every night, endlessly repeating the three-word slogans of his predecessor, and of course a man who used to believe that action on climate change was actually important. Well, as has been said, I don't think Tony Abbott was much of a Prime Minister, but he was a hell of a lot better at being Tony Abbott than Malcolm Turnbull will ever be. Now, there are very few issues, in fact there are almost no issues upon which I agree with Senator Bernadi. But I do respect one thing. He does stand up for what he believes in. And he is clearly no longer prepared to stomach the rank hypocrisy of a leader who clings to office by parroting views in which he does not believe. But there is another lesson here for the Prime Minister. It's never enough. It's never enough. No matter how many times, how much you bend, how many times you sell your soul to the hard right of the party, no matter how often you betray everything you have ever stood for, it is never enough. That is what Senator Bernadi has today demonstrated. For every concession, another will be demanded. And when you cave in on that, they'll just ask for another. And when you cave in on that, another will be demanded of you. So I say to those opposite, and I say to the Prime Minister, time to call time on this farce. Why don't you do a little of what Senator Bernadi suggested? He said, put principle back into politics. Well, Australians await this from Malcolm Turnbull.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Brandis.
Thank you, Mr President. The Liberal Party, the Coalition, the Government are disappointed by the course that Senator Bernadi has taken this morning. We believe that he has done the wrong thing, because only 7 months ago Senator Bernadi was elected by the people of South Australia to serve in the Senate as a Liberal senator. There is a variety of views in the Liberal Party, as there is a variety of views in the Labor Party. But only 7 months ago, Senator Bernadi was happy to stand before the people of South Australia and to say that he sought their endorsement to serve for a 6-year term as a Liberal senator. Now, Senator Bernadi has been a participant in debates in the Liberal Party, as have I. But in the 7 months since the federal election, nothing has changed. There is no policy for which the Liberal Party and the government stands today which is not the same as the platform on which Senator Bernadi sought election by the people of South Australia only 7 months ago. And in view of that, we find it perplexing that when there is no difference between the policy and platform on which he sought re-election and the policy and platform of the government today, he would feel the need to take this course. There was no need for him to take this course because, as the former Prime Minister, Mr Howard, famously said, the Liberal Party is a broad church. It can accommodate people like Senator Bernadi, and it can accommodate people of more moderate views than Senator Bernadi. And it's genius. And the reason why it has been the government of Australia for longer than any other political party is because people within the Liberal Party have understood that, as Senator Bernadi, a former state president and a former federal vice president, should understand it as well. We in the government will deal with Senator Bernadi as we deal with all members of the crossbench in a professionally courteous and respectful way. We will treat him as a colleague, and for many members of the government, he will continue to be a personal friend. But we do not condone what he has done. And might I say that if one seeks to restore confidence in the political class, it is a poor way to begin by breaking the promise one makes to one's electors to serve for the political party on whose platform and on whose ticket one stood. What Senator Bernadi has done today is not a Conservative thing to do, because breaking faith with the electorate, breaking faith with the people who voted for you, breaking faith with the people who have supported you through thick and thin for years and indeed decades, is not a Conservative thing to do. Nevertheless, as I said, Mr President, we will continue to treat Senator Bernadi courteously, professionally, as a colleague. There is one respect in which, of course, Senator Bernadi stands in a different position than the other members of the Senate crossbench. Unlike the other members of the Senate crossbench, Senator Bernadi was elected to support the policies of this government. And whether within the Liberal Party or now as a member of the crossbench, what we will be seeking of Senator Bernadi is to do no more than to support the policies and measures on which he stood when he sought re-election by the people of South Australia in July of last year. Now, Senator Wong, predictably, seeks to make political points. She's entitled to do that, and I'm not going to engage in a slanging match with Senator Wong, other than to remind her that it is not unknown on either side of politics for people to become unhappy and unsettled in the political party which they were elected to represent and to leave. We saw that in the parliament before last with Mr Peter Slipper in the other place. We saw it in this Senate some 20 years ago in the case of former Senator Mal Colston. But unlike the Labor Party on the occasion of the Mal Colston defection, we won't be abusing Senator Bernadi. We won't be engaged. We express disappointment, but we won't be abusing him in the way, for example, we saw former Senator Robert Ray conduct the most vindictive personal campaign against Senator Mal Colston that any of us can remember. We won't be doing that. We will be treating him as a professional colleague with appropriate professional courtesy. But Senator Wong, you observe, cheaply if I may say so,
On my left.
that there is division on my side of politics. The departure of one person from a party room of more than 100 hardly constitutes division, particularly when I look across this chamber and I see not one party of the left but two. Not one party of the left but two. I see the 26 Labor Party senators, but I also see their mortal rivals and enemies, the 9 Greens senators. Do you know, Mr President, that if you examine the statistics from the last federal election, they reveal something very instructive. Do you know that if you were a young Australian, a person under the age of 30, whose political sympathies lay with the left, you were as likely to vote for the Greens Party as you were to vote for the Australian Labor Party? So please, Senator Wong, we won't be having any lectures from you about division in politics when your entire electoral base is being gradually, indeed not so gradually, fairly rapidly eroded by your rivals on the left of politics, the Australian Greens. Nor will we be hearing sententious lectures from you, Senator Wong, the person who sits in the same party room that former Senator Mal Colston once sat. So, Mr President, this is a sad day for the Liberal Party. It is a sad day when somebody leaves the family. Senator Bernadi will have to account to the Australian people and to his own conscience about how he can continue to sit in this parliament, having been elected as a Liberal. But that is a matter for him. But we in the government will proceed with the important business of making Australia secure and prosperous. We have a very busy agenda in 2017, and we look forward to working with every senator for the best interests of our country.
Thank you, Senator Brandis. Senator Di Natale.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, in Senator Bernadi we have 6.5 foot of ego but not an inch of integrity. Not an inch. I would have respected that speech if he'd given it a year ago, before he stood as a Liberal Party candidate and waited to get himself a 6-year term in the Senate. What a hypocrite, coming in here talking about ensuring that he's there representing the values of people who have conservative views, when he himself has shown himself to be a person lacking in integrity and substance. But what this reveals, Mr President, is we have a divided government where the right hand doesn't know what the far right hand is doing anymore. This is a government now in turmoil, in absolute turmoil. We're seeing a sectarian split in the broad church that is the Liberal Party. We're seeing it come apart at the seams. There's a very clear message in this for Prime Minister Turnbull. You don't negotiate with extremists. You do not negotiate with extremists because it doesn't matter how much you give them, they always want more. It's never enough. It's never enough. And you look at the capitulation that we have seen from this Prime Minister on issues that he believed were issues of substance. Remember, this was the Prime Minister who said he would never lead a party that wasn't as committed to climate change as he is. We have him, several days ago, spruiking clean coal, straight out of the Senator Bernadi manual of conservative politics, out there spruiking for something that does not exist. We have entered fairyland here. On marriage equality, a man who's marched at Mardi Gras, capitulating to the far right in his own party. Perhaps he was convinced by Senator Bernadi's persuasive arguments around bestiality and the consequences that might flow if we allowed people to marry each other regardless of gender and sexuality. Disgraceful contributions from a man who has not got the courage to put his views to the Australian electorate. On the Republic, we have Malcolm Turnbull, the man who led the charge for Australia to become a republic, now saying we can't do anything until the passing of the Queen. Well, surely that's the point of a republic is we don't have to take orders from the Queen. We are independent of the British monarchy. I mean, this is a man who has sold out on the most fundamental principles, who has so utterly capitulated to the likes of Senator Bernadi, Mr Christensen and so many others in his party room. I heard this morning one of the Labor Party members refer to the Prime Minister as being paraded around like a prize bull at the Easter show, being paraded through the ring, being led by the nose by those on the far right. Well, this is a prize bull who has now been knackered. This is a prize bull who now stands for nothing, incapable of doing anything. This is a man who is so hollow. This is a man who is so lacking in integrity and substance that perhaps he should join Senator Bernadi and they can form their own party. The Hollow Men. The Hollow Men, because this is a Prime Minister who, when it comes to taking a stand on the issues that matter, on climate change, on whether this country should end discrimination in marriage, on becoming a republic, or indeed on taking on the dangerous lunatic that is now the President of the United States of America, what we see is appeasement. Appeasement. It is time for this Prime Minister to decide what he stands for and to ensure that the Australian community are given the opportunity to vote for somebody who, at the very least, will take a position based on principle, rather than a Prime Minister who has sold out on his core beliefs and has capitulated to the likes of Senator Bernadi. And I just say to Senator Bernadi, what's the point? How much further can the coalition go? What do they need to do to satisfy you? Zero taxes? Is that what we want? No public health care or education in this country? Is that what you want? How much further can this government go in tearing up the social safety net, in shredding universal health care and education before the likes of Senator Bernadi and Mr Christensen will be satisfied? The lesson here is very, very clear. In Senator Bernadi, 6.5 foot of ego, not an inch of integrity. Had the guts to do it a year ago, he might have got some grudging respect, but to do it just after you've been given a 6-year term shows the sort of person that he is. And as for the Prime Minister, hopefully he will take stock now and recognise that in capitulating to the views of the far right, what you are doing is not just selling out the Australian people, but selling your soul. Selling your soul. And the Australian people know a sellout when they see it.
Senator Hinch.
Mr Deputy President, I stand here and watch as a new senator as well, having been here as long as Senator Bernadi, to hear him stand there talking about principle when he has stood as a Liberal candidate, been elected by the people of South Australia as a Liberal candidate, I think is a joke. 330,000 people in South Australia, I feel sorry for them. They voted Liberal. They voted, with him on the top of the Senate ticket, they voted for a Liberal senator for 6 years. Below the line, Senator Bernadi got something like 2,000 votes. And yet he stands up here and talks about principle. It sounds crude, but it reminds me of the words of President Lyndon Johnson, who once said about a critic of his party, and the government knows the ones they've got inside their tent. President Johnson said of one of his critics, he said why he hadn't fired him or tried to get rid of him or expel him. He said, "I'd rather have him inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in." Well, maybe Malcolm Turnbull is well rid of Senator Bernadi, because at least he's now out there pissing all over everybody else. And inside his own party room, he has one less...
Senator Hinch, I draw you to attention to standing orders. You're sailing fairly close to the wind.
All right, I'll take it back there, but I'll leave the quote from President Johnson, because he's a president and he said it. I just want to go on record and say I find it's appalling when this happened. What happens in a lower house, what should happen in a lower house rather, is if somebody changes their opinion, doesn't like their party anymore, wants to get rid of it, they should resign their seat in the lower house. They should then go to the people and stand and say, this is who I am, this is what I stand for now, and stand for re-election. Unfortunately, of course, in the Senate, you can't do that, and that is not the best democratic way to do things.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. As a member, as a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia, I would like to share some comments that were given to me across southwest Queensland during the break from sitting in the last few months. They echo and reinforce Senator Bernadi's comments insofar as they were directed to the political elites and the political establishment, the political class. The people of Australia, and we see the people of America and the people of Britain, are tired of the ruling class, and I see Senator Bernadi's call as yet another call to listen to the people, serve the people, because the people are have disrespect, disregard and no loyalty to the members, the way this chamber behaves. So I echo Senator Bernadi's call to the elites and the establishment to start returning to serving the people of our states and our Commonwealth.